My parents kicked me out at 17. Now they begged to move in. I said yes, but it ended in explosive truth 8 years ago. My parents threw me out of the house with a trash bag after blaming me for my brother's drunk driving accident. Kicked out with a trash bag. I never thought I'd hear my parents' voices again after what they did to me. But here I am, 25, with my own house, and out of the blue comes a request that made my blood boil. These are the same parents who, at 17, handed me a black trash bag for my clothes, slammed the door in my face, and told me I was no longer welcome. All because my brother, the golden child, got drunk, crashed his car, and somehow, in their twisted logic, it was my fault. Growing up with Jake, my older brother, meant living in a rigged system. He could do no wrong, I could do no right. If he skipped school, I must have distracted him. If something broke in the house, I was automatically blamed, even if I wasn't home. By my teenage years, I had mastered the art of avoidance, spending as little time at home as possible, staying at friends' places, keeping my head down. I figured I could survive until 18, move out on my own terms, and finally be free of it all. But fate had other plans, cruel, accelerated plans. The night it happened, I was at home, studying for an exam. Jake went out to blow off steam with friends. Hours later, he was drunk behind the wheel, swerving into a fence and a parked car. No one else was hurt, but his car was totaled, and he ended up in the hospital with a broken arm and a concussion. When I arrived at the hospital, my father's face wasn't filled with concern for Jake, it was filled with rage for me. He accused me of driving Jake to drink. Why? Because at dinner, I had teased him about his new girlfriend. Harmless teasing, but apparently enough, in my father's mind, to cause a near-fatal drunk driving accident. I tried to reason with him. Jake was an adult making his own choices. But my father shouted over me, insisting that I'd stressed my brother out, pushed him over the edge. The argument escalated so badly that hospital staff asked us to leave. I thought once we got home, tempers would cool. Instead, my father ordered me to pack my things. My mother stood by, teary-eyed, silent. He shoved a black trash bag into my hands. 20 minutes later, I was on the sidewalk in the middle of the night, homeless. I walked 2 miles to my friend Mia's house. Her family took me in, helped me finish high school, and eventually, I put myself through college. My parents never once called to see if I was alive. For them, I was gone. 8 years later, I built my life from scratch. I have a degree, a stable job, and my own home. And then, my mother calls with a request that knocks the air out of me. The call that changed everything. It had been nearly 8 years of complete silence. No calls, no letters, no apologies. Just me building a life from the ground up, fueled by the quiet rage of abandonment. So when I saw Mom pop up on my phone screen, my first thought was that something terrible had happened, someone was dead or dying. Against my better judgment, I called her back. Her voice trembled with what sounded like relief. She asked how I'd been, making awkward small talk before finally getting to the point. Your father and we need a place to stay for a while. I actually laughed, a short, humorless sound, before asking if she was serious. She explained that Jake had lost his apartment and moved back in with them. Now they were all struggling financially in a cramped 2-bedroom. With no job for Dad and Mom's part-time income barely covering bills, they couldn't make rent. Their grand plan? Move into my house temporarily until they got back on their feet. She tried to paint it as a chance for us to be together again and heal old wounds, emphasizing that families support each other. Not a single word about the night they threw me out. No acknowledgement of the years of silence. Just an expectation that I'd open my door like none of it had happened. When I didn't immediately answer, she passed the phone to my father. His voice was stiff, almost formal. It'd really help us out, kid. The same nickname he used when I was young, back when I thought it meant affection. Now it felt hollow. I told them I needed time to think. The moment I hung up, I sat on my couch, staring at the wall, torn between fury and the faint sting of guilt. They hadn't cared if I was safe when I was 17. Why should I care now? And yet, the idea of refusing my aging parents in what they claimed was a desperate moment twisted my stomach. I hadn't given them an answer yet. But part of me knew this decision wasn't just about letting them in my house, it was about letting them back into my life. The diner reunion. After a few sleepless nights, I decided I couldn't make this choice without looking them in the eye. If they wanted my help, they'd have to face me in person. I chose a neutral setting, a small local diner. When I walked in, I almost didn't recognize them. My dad looked older, worn down. My mom's eyes darted nervously between me and the table. We sat in stiff silence for a moment before I broke it. "So, you said you needed my help. Let's talk about that." They laid out their situation. Dad had been laid off a year ago, no luck finding work since. Mom's part-time job barely kept the lights on. A few months back, Jake lost his job too, fell behind on rent, and moved back in with them. Now, with all three in a tiny apartment, their finances were collapsing. Their lease was about to expire, and they couldn't afford to renew. They stressed that moving in with me would be temporary. They didn't say a single word about the past. So I asked. Calmly, I told them I still didn't understand why they'd abandoned me at 17, why I'd never received a real apology. Mom's eyes welled up. Of course we regret it. We made mistakes, we were under a lot of stress. It was vague. Too vague. So I pressed harder. Did they understand what it had done to me? Did they intend to apologize? She sniffled, voice trembling. We're sorry. We do regret it. Dad muttered, without meeting my eyes. Yeah, we shouldn't have handled it that way. It felt forced, like they were saying just enough to get what they wanted. I told them so. Dad finally looked up. We thought it was best at the time. We weren't thinking straight. I told them it wasn't enough, that they'd chosen Jake over me without hesitation. Mom said she was proud of what I'd achieved, a sentence I'd never heard from her before. When I asked why they never reached out, Mom admitted she'd been afraid I wouldn't want to hear from them. Dad said nothing. By the time the check came, I was emotionally drained. I told them plainly, I wasn't agreeing to anything yet. If I did, there would be strict rules and a clear time limit. They nodded quickly, too quickly, as if relief was more important than sincerity. That night, my phone buzzed. A text from Jake, the first in 8 years. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. My brother's side of the story. Jake's message was short. Hey, can we talk? I hesitated. My gut said ignore it, but curiosity won. I replied, asking what he wanted. He suggested a phone call later that night. Hearing his voice after almost 8 years was surreal. At first, it was polite small talk, congratulations on my house, my job. Then came a sigh, and words I never expected. I'm sorry for everything that happened. I never wanted you to get hurt or kicked out. My screw-up messed up your life, and that sucks. It wasn't perfect, but it was more than I'd gotten from our parents. I told him I appreciated it but reminded him that sorry doesn't erase the years I spent rebuilding my life alone. He explained that after the crash, our parents hadn't told him the truth. They claimed I'd chosen to stay with our aunt, that I didn't want to come home. He said he believed them at first, even urged them to contact me later, though he admitted he didn't push hard. Eventually, he moved on with his own life. I told him plainly, I never wanted to leave. I was thrown out. He was quiet for a long moment before saying, I believe you. And you didn't deserve that. If I could go back, I'd have done things differently. Then he shifted to the present. He told me about Dad's mild heart attack a year ago, news I was hearing for the first time. Mom cried every day, he said. If they ended up homeless, it might literally kill our father. I listened, conflicted. Part of me still burned with resentment, but another part, the one that remembered being 17 and scared, couldn't ignore the image of my parents on the street. I told him the same thing I told them, no decision yet, but if I agreed, there would be strict conditions. He said he understood and promised to do whatever it takes to make it work. Against my instincts, I began leaning towards saying yes. And that's when I learned just how quickly old wounds can reopen. Living together again. After days of back and forth in my own head, I called them with my decision. I would allow them, and Jake, to move in. 3 months max, strict rules. Respect my home. Contribute where they could. Actively work on finding jobs and saving money. They agreed to everything without hesitation. That should have been my first red flag. The first week was, surprisingly civil. We even had a couple of peaceful family dinners. But by week 2, the cracks began to show. Mom started reorganizing my kitchen, moving my pots, spices, and plates around because she thought it would be more efficient. I told her politely to stop. She got defensive, insisting she was just trying to help. Jake's messiness was worse. Dirty dishes in the sink, clothes on the floor, shoes in the hallway. Each time I reminded him, he'd mumble sorry and improve, for exactly 1 day. And the job hunt? Minimal. Dad claimed he was applying, but I never saw him doing it. Jake slept in late and spent hours gaming. I didn't expect miracles, but watching them put in so little effort when I'd opened my home to them made my blood simmer. I bit my tongue, choosing small reminders over big confrontations. But then I overheard them in the kitchen one afternoon when they thought I was out of earshot. Dad's voice, low and irritated. We just have to deal with it for now. Once we save up, we'll get our own place. I can't stand living under her rules. Mom's hushed reply was too quiet to catch. I froze in the hallway, heart pounding. My rules were just basic respect in my own house, and he couldn't even stand that. That night, I lay in bed, replaying those words over and over. My gut told me something I didn't want to admit: this arrangement might not survive the full 3 months. I knew a confrontation was coming. The only question was, would I start it, or would they push me over the edge first? The breaking point. I didn't plan for the conversation to happen that soon, but the tension in the house was thick enough to choke on. I called them all into the living room: Mom, Dad, and Jake. No small talk. No pleasantries. I feel disrespected and taken for granted in my own home. I began, my voice steady but sharp. I listed the issues one by one: the messes I'd been cleaning up, the constant boundary pushing, the lack of effort in job hunting. Then I brought up the overheard kitchen comment. Dad's face went red. Mom's hand shot to her mouth. He stammered something about just venting and how hard it was to be dependent on his child. I told him I could understand pride, but not trash-talking me under my own roof. After everything you did to me, I owed you nothing. And still, I let you in. All I asked for was basic respect. Was that really too much? Jake actually spoke up, quietly saying, "It's not okay, Dad." Then I asked the question I'd been holding on to for years. Why did you do it? Why did you throw me away? There was a long pause. Finally, Dad said, "We were scared. We almost lost your brother that night. He was in a bad place, and we needed someone else to blame. We thought it would help him cope. We weren't thinking about what it would do to you." Mom was crying now, nodding. By the time we realized how wrong it was, we were too cowardly to face it. It was the first time I'd heard the truth, and the first real apology. I told them I appreciated their honesty, but the damage was done. The trauma didn't vanish just because I finally understood their reasoning. I took a deep breath. I think it's best we end this arrangement now. I'll give you time to find somewhere else, but I need my space back. They agreed quietly. I even offered to help them find a short-term rental, but Dad shook his head. Over the next week, they packed. Mom hugged me at the door, sobbing thanks and apologies. Dad shook my hand, then pulled me into a brief hug. Even Jake hugged me and promised to keep in touch. When the door closed behind them, the house was silent again. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. They came back into my life asking for shelter. I gave it, and in the end, I took it away. Maybe that's not cruelty. Maybe that's closure.